We're not wife material, though.
No, we're not for novice players. I'll say that.
Trolls are always right, by the way. Men will be like, oh, these women and their body counts. I'm like, the average woman, it's like 5 or 6, I think, is the number.
It's estimated about like 5% of women have a sex drive that's really similar to like a masculine sex drive. That's not a lot. So that doesn't help all of these women that are listening to massive podcasts like Call Her Daddy that are saying sleep with anyone, don't have any second thoughts, just like there's no consequences to these actions. That's also not helpful.
It's like a generation of women who can't even get pregnant anymore, who are telling younger women this is the only thing that they should care about. These younger generations grew up under MeToo and all of these, like, you know, you've got to be like, can I kiss you? Can it robotically, like, may I touch your hair? And there's nothing hot about that.
Bridget, thanks for coming back on the show. I'm so excited that it's just us this time.
No bro energy.
No broing. It's so funny because right before that episode, I don't know if you remember, I was like, what do you do when you feel that everyone's talking over and you can't really interject because you're a woman? And then they say, she's a bitch and she's interrupting. And you're like, that happened to me the other day. And I was just so quiet. And I was like, oh, you can do that? You could just sit there and be quiet?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like that happened. So I'm glad to like have girl time.
Yeah, it's different energy too, I think, you know. Women, it's always interesting on Walk-Ins Welcome when I have women on the podcast. It just is a different energetic force field entirely, and women can go deep so quickly with one another if they just vibe. And so that was, I think, what was happening with us. But then you have 2 dudes and they're like, and they're jokesters, you know, like not just men too, just comedian men are like a different breed entire. I mean, comedians I think are a different breed, but male comedians are just always, they're like, I'm uncomfortable. Let's make fun of it. Let's look for the joke.
I didn't stand a chance.
No. That was not a fair fight for you at all. Yeah, and they're quick, you know. They're just like, especially when they get going. And I mean, even that one clip that I still think is the funniest one about the drag queen story hour.
I didn't know how they just were pulling that. So for me, as like a regular person that has zero ad-libbing or stage presence or training or any
you
of
have
that,
stage presence.
It's like you guys are doing magic in front of me, and I'm just like, ooh, this is amazing.
You're like, how are they doing this? But those guys are good. They just are, they're kind of in sync with one another. So yeah, it's good to just be able to talk about girl stuff.
I was trying to think about when I first started following you. It was, I feel like ages ago. And I think it was, you were in the middle of some kind of cultural shitstorm, and I don't know what caused it, but I noticed in your bio is talking about being politically homeless. And I was like, oh, what is that? Because that's how I feel. I try to go into these different buckets or parties, and I'm constantly getting kicked out for one reason or another. Right. And I was like, oh, someone gets me. Yeah. So
I think it's really hard to be a woman right now, actually, and feel like you have a party that cares about you politically. That's just how I feel. Because I wrote this piece for Spectator, and it was about how I felt like neither party really cared about women. You get kind of used as a prop. One party, I'm kind of like, well, the right has a woman problem, but at least they can define what a woman is. So I might be a single issue voter on that. The left has done, I feel like they know what a woman is when they need to know what a woman is, and then otherwise gender doesn't exist, and you can be a man or a woman or anything you want to be. And the minute they, even just recently, they kind of ended up making that male video, like, I'm a real man, which was not real men trying to pander to men. It wasn't the Harris campaign. It was a Vote Save America PAC, but still,
I didn't see it. I just keep seeing this, like the spoofs on it. Yeah.
So it was ridiculous and roundly mocked and deserved to be mocked. But the point, the point that I was making was, I love how quickly they suddenly know what men and women are. Oh, I'm like, oh, we suddenly know men and, because they were saying things like man up. I'm like, I thought this was internalized misogyny to even say this kind of stuff. And now suddenly you know what a man is, but you rely on these ridiculous stereotypes in order to try and present what a man is. It's not, it's such a weird, I don't know. All that gender stuff is very strange to me. It seems like it's alienated a lot of women from the party. I mean, I've been screaming women online for
I love that. I know. And all your merch, it was so good.
I brought one of those sweatshirts actually. The just wondering like when they're going to use birthing person, or when suddenly they're like, I'm not afraid of women. Oh, you know what a woman is. That's nice. How convenient of you to pick that up and use it when you need to. You know what a woman is when you're talking about abortion. Sometimes. And sometimes
men can get them too.
It's crazy how it's really infested everything too. Even when I was in my like birthing, it was a virtual birthing class because it was during COVID and we were in California. So of course everything was still locked down, but they were using like birthing person. And you could see even in LA, the people were just like rolling their eyes on the Zoom. They're like, oh,
that's
like
good.
Birthing person.
That's
really
surprising to me.
Yeah, no, they were just like, okay, well, I guess we'll go along with this. But it's just like, or just women, you know, like, so yeah, I've felt very, and then you have the right wing stuff, which is like childless cat ladies, the body count discussion, which I think you and I are very familiar with.
I was talking to this woman. It's so funny. My travels this month, I went to a Tucker Carlson event, then I went to Rescue the Republic, and then I went to a sexual health conference in Denver, which was like so left and so progressive and woke. And I'm like, no one can accuse me of being in any kind of echo chamber because I just went to both extremes and I disagree with a lot on both sides, and I agree with a lot on both sides. But the amount of times that like woman was refused to be used was crazy to me. And then the other side turned into a sermon. And it's like, well, if you haven't taken the Lord and Savior as your, or Jesus as your Lord and Savior, then you're also condemned. And then you have these conversations around body count. And when I went to this progressive conference, the woman was talking about sexual shame, and they were also talking about sexual maturity. And if you have someone that's approaching you with that question, it's just a certain level of maturity that they're not ready to handle, because it's like, well, what are you really getting to with that question? Like, do you really want to know just like how many people I've been to? First, also define what sex is, because that definition has changed just like every other definition. But this one I think is actually a good change, because it used to be defined as intercourse with a husband and a wife where the male ejaculates. Okay. So it had nothing to do with the woman's experience or her pleasure or her being in her body or anything that's supposed to be symbiotic. So like I actually am for that definition change. So they're like, well, are you counting kissing or heavy petting or oral or anal? Because some people think they're a virgin even though they've done that. So first let's define Catholic. That. And then also like, what are you really trying to get to? Is it just like this retroactive jealousy? Are you worried about how many people are better than you? Or do you want to know what I like? Because that's an interesting question. Like what turns you on? And,
what is the argument that they have about body count?
The right?
Yeah.
I think that it's the old cow and the milk analogy. So why would you buy a cow if you can get the milk for free? But then that's to say that the only value a woman has is her sexuality. And like that is a big part. Absolutely. But that isn't going to be forever. And if you make a commitment to be with someone until you get old, that's going to wax and wane. So you have to have something else that you're bringing to the table. And it's like, how often are you really spending, or how much time are you actually spending in bed with your partner too, right? It's not even every day for most people. So it's a fraction of what you're bringing to the dynamic. So I think it's short-sighted, to say the least.
And is it just that like I've heard so much about this, and it's been interesting because I was at Playboy. I have their nudies of me online. I was selling pictures behind Patreon before OnlyFans. I was like way ahead of the OnlyFans thing. And then I just shut it down because I never really the reason I started selling them was because people kept demanding them from me. And I was like, no, I'm just going to like, come sign up. I don't want to do this. I might as well like put them behind a paywall. But then once that became I didn't want to become my income because I didn't want to have to do it. I was also writing and doing all kinds of other things. So I wrote like a whole piece about why I get naked online and what I was trying to work out. Some of it is just stuff I was trying to work out. Some of it is pushing against this idea that you can't be sexual as a woman and also be taken seriously, which I have a big issue with, only because men are just kind of perceived as sexual beings who, you know, they need to sow their oats. And like even back in the day, it was just kind of assumed that they would have a mistress or have affairs and you just let it slide. And so there's this idea, and I don't think it's talked about enough, that men are just perceived as these sexual creatures and they get to do whatever they want. And women are, you know, the ones who have to pretend that they're not sexual. And if you are sexual, that you're basically a whore and you aren't someone who's taken seriously. And this was something that always just rubbed me the wrong way. I think I understand a lot of the arguments against it. I don't know that I disagree with a lot of them even. I also think people, you know, when you look at like the body count discussion, men will be like, oh, these women and their body counts. I'm like, the average woman, it's like 5 or 6, I think is the number.
That's what they say.
Yeah.
But that's also self-reported.
Self-reported. They're like,
and why is it
3.
always 5? Because it's like, well, a hand, you know, one hand looks good.
You're
Once you
like,
start getting to the other one, you're like, ooh, I'm a bad girl. And it, honestly, like, what changes?
This is like the 999 theory.
So if you, it's
Body
every
count.
time that you're used as somehow like you're diminishing your value, and how come it's only if it's with another person? It just doesn't make any sense to me. And then there's a conversation about like being loose, which is like a whole other problem. So it's like, is a
like physically loose?
Yeah.
Or
well, they equate them together, right? So you would get physically loose, and then obviously you have loose morals if you're doing that as well. So then are we also saying that a mom now is lesser because she had a child? Because nothing's going to make that change more than having a kid. And that's one of like the greatest things that you can do. It's tremendous. The tax that it takes on your body and the physical endurance to birth a child. So now we're going to say, oh, well, you're gross because you had a baby. Like, get out of here. You're obviously a weak little boy and you're insecure.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
I don't know many men who care about that stuff. You know, the like actual men.
Not in real life. No.
Not in real life. It is like a question. And if you do get that question, you're like, are you 19? Like, how old are you? I feel like I haven't had that question since high school. That it feels like a very high school question to ask. Like, how many people have you slept with? And I also think women do this to each other too, because long before men ever called me a slut, men ever slut shamed me or called me a whore or whatever, millions of names I get daily. Women were doing it to me in junior high and high school when I would move and I was a new girl, and they would be like, you're a slut, you're a whore. And I had never even had sex.
Same.
And it was weird because I was like, well, I'm not, you guys have like boyfriends and you're having sex. I've never even like given a blowjob or anything. So that was a weird thing to experience as a woman, being policed like that and I do think women tend to police one another in that way, just in a more like shady way. I think it's overt when they're young, but it was very, I don't know, older, it does get a little bit weird.
It's like asset protection, right? They're like, this is my security and I need to do whatever I can to make sure that he doesn't wander. And if I can say that, like, somehow attack your reputation or worth as a person, then maybe that's going to protect it, which the guy's going to do it. The guy wants to do it. It has nothing to do with the other woman. And for some reason, rather than focusing on your partner, you're focusing on this perceived threat.
Yeah, I think like Chris Williamson talks about a lot about like the intrasexual competition that happens among women and how it's very insidious, and they'll kind of undermine one another in weird ways and not be supportive. Even just the other day, there was this whole discussion going on about podcasts. This woman tweeted, you know, how come Barry Weiss is the only person who has like a moderate center-ish podcast and in this space? And then all these other women were like, no. And she went online on like one of these Redefining or something, one of these sites, and was like, none of these people are getting 20,000 or more downloads. And somebody in the comments was like, yeah, that's because women don't even listen to women's podcasts. And I was like, truer words have never been spoken. Because I think women are listening to true crime primarily. Mm-hmm. It's just when you look at politics in general, women are not as interested in politics as men are. This mm-hmm. is just a fact. Mm-hmm. When you break down how many people are, and unless it's like the abortion issue, and then suddenly they're very interested. And men are generally more on YouTube. It's like they also just dominate these spaces naturally anyway. And women are just not that interested in that kind of stuff. And I don't think it's a thing of like women not listening to each other because they're competing. I think it's just that women aren't just that as interested. And then when men want to hear about politics, like they generally want to hear from men. Mm-hmm. They might like to hear from a woman occasionally, but I think they like to, talk to each other and hear each other. It's just, that's been my experience. I could be wrong.
No, there's not a lot. If you look at the charts, it's probably, if I pull it up right now, it's probably almost all dudes.
Yeah, pull it up. Pull it up, Jamie.
I know that with podcasts in general, I want to say it's almost 70% men that consume on the consumer end.
Oh, interesting.
So it's already skewed.
And the other 30% is women listening to true crime,
which I don't understand.
I don't either.
You're welcoming that into your life, ladies. If you're listening to that, it's a matter of time. Number one is Kill List. So there we go. Joe Rogan's
What's Kill
too.
List?
I think it's probably a true crime. Oh, it's a novel. Interesting. A novel's number one.
This is overall.
NBC Daily News. Call Her Daddy's 5.
Which weird. I've never.
Crime Junkie is 6. Wiser Than Me with Julia Lewis. That's surprising. Dateline. Pod Save America. Tucker. This is on Apple too. Megyn Kelly. Okay. So there actually were a couple women. Okay.
Megyn Kelly's up there. That would have been my guess.
Eat our words. There's some women up there.
Call Her Daddy, I would have guessed because they gave her $60 million. So
yeah, so
obviously kind of
putting
she has an audience.
Yeah.
And then they're going to invest in making that. But I think she does capture the younger women, the 23 to 28-year-old women.
Did you watch any of her Kamala episode or some of the clips?
I've tried to listen to her. I have nothing against her. It's just not my
stage of life.
It was never my stage of life. It's like I never liked reality television. I never was into, it's a little bit too vapid or like shallow or something. Like I've never been into like celebrity interviews. Yeah. I don't care. They always seem so boring. I want to know like why you think the way you think and what you've been through in your life. And maybe she does do that. I don't know. I haven't been able to really get into it. No, and I've tried.
Mm-hmm. I've only ever seen clips too.
Yeah. What did you think of it?
So I saw the one that was going viral and it was talking about abortion, which I don't understand the obsession over it, which I'd love to get your take on this, but she goes,
love abortion.
She goes, we're gonna sit here and can you think of any example where the government has control over a man's body? And she's like, oh, I'll wait. And then crickets are playing. And then everyone's like, the draft. Yeah. How about the draft?
Yeah.
And then how about when you
what
were
about the vaccine mandates?
That too. So it doesn't take a lot of like mental energy to come up with that answer. And those things I think are, the draft should be illegal. I think that's insane. If you have to draft people, you already lost. But this obsession with abortion is kind of crazy to me because everyone is saying Trump is anti-abortion. He's not.
He's not. He's actually pretty squished.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he even said that he just thinks it should be a state rights issue, which I agree with. I wish that there were more rights for the states and like a smaller or like no federal government at all. If I had it my way. But I think states' rights issue is fine. And then what you actually saw when it got reversed, where you had these like deep southern states that were actually pretty moderate, like doing 6-12 weeks. I know 6 sounds like not a lot, but I don't know. This is my take. I cycle track because I got off the pill as soon as I realized how toxic it was. Mm-hmm. So I cycle track. At both pregnancies, I knew like right away. Yeah. And my second, because I was trying, I knew I was less than 2 weeks pregnant and I knew I was pregnant. So I know that's not everyone's situation. I'm not like going to debate like whether or not it should be legal. But the obsession is crazy because when you ask most of these women if they've ever had one, they say no. Maybe they're not being honest, but they say no. And it's like, well, would you ever have one? They're like, oh, no, not for me. I would never do that. So it's like, why are you so emotional over this thing that you've never had and you never see yourself doing because it's against like your own ethics or your own morality? And like, I don't know, World War III seems a lot more pressing to me than whether or not you can abort a baby.
Yeah, that was something that Mary Catherine Ham, she was on my podcast this past week, and we had I love her. You would love her. She's just like such a normie whisperer. But we were talking, she was like, it always offended me that this is the only thing we care about, because then it just once again assumes that we're just these like baby makers. And it's not like we don't live in a time where you can take birth control or do things to make sure that you're not getting pregnant and take some responsibility for that. And, you know, people will be like, well, it's always held women back. I'm like, yeah, before the pill it did, before we had condoms, and before there was a lot of things that held people back. And also men died in huge numbers because they were out working in, you know, mines and
with
fields.
Mercury and coal.
Like,
and
yeah, there's a lot of things that were really bad that affected people, and now they don't. And the abortion thing it was weird. They did the 6-week heartbeat ban the literal week I was 6 weeks pregnant and heard my daughter's heartbeat. And I've always been pretty moderate on abortion. I think in the first trimester, so much can go wrong anyway. I'm like, I understand the pro-life argument. If you think it's a life, that wouldn't even matter. I do understand and respect that. And even I'm a little bit morally conflicted on that. You know, like if it's a life at 6 weeks, why wouldn't it be a life at 4 weeks? Why wouldn't it be? So I can back it up, but I still do think in that first trimester, like, okay, I think that's a pretty moderate position most of the world takes. And then when you poll people, the more pregnant you get, the lower people have a tolerance for abortion. And third trimester, there was a great article actually in the Atlantic of all places that was talking about how you can't pretend that ninth month abortions aren't happening if you want to actually make these arguments, because they do happen, not just for medical reasons. And if you're going to, and the majority of the population is very against this when you poll people left and right. And so why not address this and try and make an argument for or against it, or even back it up a little instead of just acting like it's not happening, which is a lie. And I do think too that it's like a very strange psyop that they've managed to, it's like a generation of women who can't even get pregnant anymore, who are telling younger women this is the only thing that they should care about. And I can't believe we're still fighting for this. And I don't like seeing some of the stuff that's happening where providers are worried about being sued or losing their license because they helped a woman who was having a miscarriage. So this is where I think on the state by state level, you have to have very specific carve-outs, regulations, so that doctors don't have to worry about that, and they can give women the medical care that they need when they have a miscarriage or whatever.
Is that happening though? Or is that like one of those urban legends where like you have a medically necessary, what are they called? Like a DNC? Yeah. And they're like, we can't do that because it's not an abortion. Like there's no baby anymore.
I've seen that it's happening. I never know what to believe. Yeah. So I try to, again, good faith. I mean, it must happen. I don't know if it's a complete edge case, and we
where
only
someone
hear
doesn't
about
understand
it.
the law and like they're not doing what they're responsible to do.
Yeah, and then there was that story that they said a woman died because she didn't have the right abortion care, but it was actually the abortion pill that ended up killing her. So that
Whoa.
was a weird story that was like going viral. And then when you dug down into it, you're like, oh, it was actually the abortion pill that she died from. And this was so yeah, again, we live in a time where institutional trust and information is all, you're like, is this true? I don't know.
How'd it kill her? Do you know?
I can't remember the exact circumstances. I think it was something like, you know, those pills are crazy. You can
I don't know anything about them.
I just had a conversation with someone who had experienced this, and I had no idea that they basically give you an abortion pill and send you home and tell you like, okay, it'll be just like a heavy period. And it's not like a heavy period. And a lot of people will have hemorrhaging complications. Like you could, you know, I'm not exactly sure how long,
maybe we should,
but it's still not good. You know, even at like 4 or 5 weeks, it's still going to be not more than a heavy period.
Yeah.
And I've had a miscarriage, so I know, and I needed to go to the emergency room. And so I feel like it's a situation like that where you're essentially inducing a miscarriage. And so, and it's crazy. I didn't know you could just like send people home with this to like do it at home. That seems like insane to me.
It does, even from like the mental health care aspect of that. And then that
hormonally.
That was the thing too, when I saw the pop-up clinic that was at the DNC, and this isn't even about the actual abortion procedure or whether they were doing pills. I'm assuming it was pills.
I think it was the pills.
Yeah. But if you have someone that's walking there for a political conference and then they're like making an impromptu decision to now have an abortion, that seems a little bit unhinged. That does seem something that you would want to plan. And then are you providing aftercare for that person mentally? Because that is a huge choice that you just basically put in front of them.
There's
no responsibility there.
There's no like after abortion.
That's crazy to me.
This is something that I got into with this woman, and it will probably be an episode that is never released, but it is. It's a lot like when I talk to detransitioners and they're like, oh, there's all this support and mental health and everybody's willing to get you on the hormones and get you on the track to get the mastectomy. And the minute you want to detransition and you look around and no one's there and no one will pick up the phone and no one will take your calls. And you hear this story over and over and over again from detransitioners who are like, once I got all of these surgeries, there was no mental health care to help me with the hormones and that transition. And then when I decided against it, there was no one around and they were basically just left alone. And I think that is the same thing I see with abortion, where it's very much a lot of propaganda to be like, oh, you know, like the shout your abortion thing has always been so, I hate the extremes on both sides are not helpful.
Yeah.
Calling everybody a baby killer for doing this is not helpful. Neither is being like, after I went to the club, I just got my abortion and like, I'm going to write about it I'm going to tweet about it and shout about my abortion, because now you're taking something that I think most women who go through this, they wrestle with this. It's not something that comes easily. Maybe some women it is easy, but I think the majority of women who have gone through this, it was a struggle for them. They wrestled with it. It was internally conflicted. A lot of people have regrets forever. A lot of women have had abortions and now can't have a child now that they want one, and have that regret of like, did I blow my one chance to have a kid? Because now I'm deciding at 45 that I want to have a child. And also the culture has lied to you about that. So there's a lot. I worry a lot about the call her daddy audience, because I was them. And I feel like I was the first. I'm 40, almost 46 years old. So my mom was sexual revolution, you know, burn your bra generation, if that was even a thing. And we were really the first generation that was kind of truly liberated. And I feel like there's so many of us that are kind of stumbling back from the war, being like, you know, and I realize this is a weird conversation to have on the other heels of like the body count discussion, but I do feel like there are a lot of us who are kind of turning towards women being like, go back, like turn around. It's not that sex is bad. It's just that I don't think, and I said this in my regret being a slut thing, essay that I wrote on Substack. It's that I think, like the idea that you can just sleep your way to empowerment and shout your abortion and not pay any consequences for this is a lie. Mm-hmm. And it's a lie that has been kind of sold to these women, and it's the false bill of goods. And at the end of it, and this whole idea that like having kids is bad, that is just, it's so, I want to shake all these young women and be like, I wish I had never heard any of that growing up. Mm-hmm. I wish there had been, because I was like kind of the boss, you know, I come from like the boss bitch, the evolution of that, of like, we're going to go to work and like be like Carrie and freaking Sex in the City. And we can like, none of us need to have kids, and ew, kids, like we've got to go to a baby shower in the suburbs. And I don't know, there's a lot. I got lucky. I got very, very lucky. And the problem is you can't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. So you will never really know what you're missing, because how can you? I was joking with someone the other day. I'm like, having a kid, and there were all these like younger LA, well, not younger, they're like late 30s, early 40s, young LA women. And they were like, we're just maybe thinking about having kids. I'm like, you don't have fucking time. Like, you need to do this now. What are you talking about? I know you live in a place where women are having kids at 45, but it is not easy. I was talking to somebody at Dissident Dialogues, and he was telling me, the stats are crazy. It's like 1 in 6 women who want to have a child ends up not having a child because they waited too long and it was past their fertility once you get over the age of 35, basically, the geriatrics. And these, I don't know, these women think that they can like wait until 41, 42 and just have a baby easily. It's not easy. Mm-hmm. And then you're lucky if you even have one.
Yeah, they're told like if you could just freeze your eggs, and then even freezing them, most of them don't make it through the thawing process. Like there's lack of informed consent with pretty much everything, and it's so disgusting. Mm-hmm. Like you have to be able to say risks, benefits, alternatives. Mm-hmm. If you're not doing that, then you're a really shitty provider. And that goes with everything. It goes with the abortions. It goes with the shots. It goes with freezing your eggs and IVF. But they don't do that because they just want you to pay and sign up and be a repeat customer.
I was reading some crazy statistic that's like 97% of eggs don't get used. The frozen eggs never get used. Mm-hmm. That's wild.
And it's so expensive.
It's so expensive. And then you're just keeping those things on ice, and you've got to pay for it every month, like a storage fee. Mm-hmm. And just the process is expensive. And I do there's a part of me that's wished I had done it, because once I had one, I was like, oh, if I had some eggs, maybe I could have tried to have another, which would have been nice. Mm-hmm. But I also was never one to like force that. So I decided against doing IVF. So I understand why women do it, but it's so expensive. It's so expensive. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. It's like a very strange space you and I occupy, I think, in the culture of being women who have a very open sexual past. Mm-hmm. And I don't want there to be a lot of shame around sex, because I don't think that it helps at all. And I think women should be allowed to be as sexual beings as men are. But I also know the downsides of living a promiscuous life that was not, I mean, a lot of it, I have 11 years of sobriety today.
Yeah, so congratulations.
Thank you. I think a lot, I could write a book about that piece about regret being a slut, because I think a lot of it wouldn't have happened if I wasn't drinking and using and doing drugs. So it's hard to detangle that. And I think if I was, there's a lot of women who are very conscious about having sex, and I think that's when it can be healthy and empowered, but you have to be pretty conscious about it.
You have to be so tuned in to your own North Star. And I know there's gonna be so many people that say under no circumstance can you be in alignment, or is that what you're supposed to do? And you have to remember, just because it's not for you doesn't mean that it's not for somebody else. And there's this discussion, and this is one of my biggest critiques when it comes to like the whole evolutionary biology like crew, is yes, that explains something, but it doesn't explain the whole picture. Like that argument is very thin, right? It's a good starting point. So yeah, you can say that men have always been promiscuous, and then even look at some women that have been in like poly relationships, like towards the Arctic, right? Because like resources were low, they needed multiple providers. Sure. But we also have this evolved, beautiful, higher brain, and then you can use that executive function and agency then to make a different discussion. So it's like, we use evolutionary biology to say like this is the roadmap for everyone, but we're ignoring like the tail end and just addressing the middle of the bell curve, which is important if you're trying to get information out to like the most people. But you can't say that just because most people are in the middle that both fringes are then to be denied or then said that they're like wrong in some kind of fashion. It's estimated about like 5% of women have a sex drive that's really similar to like a masculine sex drive. That's not a lot. So that doesn't help all of these women that are listening to massive podcasts like Call Her Daddy that are saying sleep with anyone, don't have any second thoughts, just like there's no consequences to these actions. That's also not helpful, because what you're describing is a fringe behavior, and maybe that applies to like someone like me, but that's not going to help the like average woman who then feels used or disgusted after a lot of like random sex. So you have to like tune into yourself and say, what do I want? Like, what am I getting out of this? Can I consciously connect for a night and then disconnect? Or am I going to be hung up on him and feel like I was just trying to be the cool girl? So you have to make the choice for yourself and like stop listening to these people with like microphones that are telling you this is the only way to live. Yeah. You know what I mean? So if you're like letting someone else make all those decisions for you, of course it's going to be out of alignment because they're not you.
Yeah. How did you get into porn?
So it sounds crazy. I was supposed to be like, it was part of my path. I believe in fate and destiny. I also believe in free will. So I think it's this delicate dance that they both do together. I think it's inescapable to say that like culture doesn't affect you. Right. So I grew up with all of the Playmates and Penthouse and Carmen Electra. And like, that's what I was seeing. So that was obviously glamorized, and I was like, I want to be one of these powerful women. My dad left, so I do think that there's an element of the love that you don't get is the love that you try to receive. So probably trying to chase like male attention, that is part of it. But in a weird way, I like cut that part off of myself for a really long time. Like I was not sexual at all. I was so shy. I was so cold. I was so scared to show any kind of affection or like confidence. And then I left a long-term relationship, like 8 years, and I was 19. So my youth was taken up, which terrible parenting. I would never let my kid be in a relationship for that long as a minor. It's so weird. From
like 11 to 19, you were in a relationship?
Yeah, basically.
Whoa, that's nuts.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Should have been cut off by a parent if I
mean, it's actually shocking you weren't like a teen mom.
He was really religious and I was not sexual at all.
Oh, okay.
At all. So I felt like I didn't know who I was because those developmental years were spent with an older boy that was influencing me.
How much older was he?
5 years.
Oh shit.
I think 5 years. Yeah.
Wait, so he was 16 and you were 11?
No. So not 5 years. So we started dating when I was 12, and I think he just got his learner's permit. So yeah, 4 years. But that's still a lot.
Yeah, that's
at that
a lot.
age. That's a lot.
Yeah.
So like heavily influenced by like him, his family, and his friends. So we break up, and I'm like, I don't really have like family. So I'm totally by myself in South Carolina going to university. And I felt like it was my first chance to figure out who I was. And for some reason I felt like really called to getting into, like I got into nude modeling, and then that kind of progressed into these other things because I wanted it to. And I just felt like that's what where I was supposed to be. In a weird way, it was less vulnerable and less scary to be able to play with sensuality and sexuality if I had an alter ego doing it and I was on a stage and you know what I mean, or a set, because it wasn't Candice doing it. It was this alter ego. So it's like, it's a safer dynamic to kind of explore. And I'm glad I did, because I'm a totally different person because of those experiences. I was toxically jealous of every relationship I was in. This challenged all of my ideas of like what love was, what possession was, like what scarcity was, attachment issues, abandonment issues, all of these things that I had to face head on if I was going to be in this industry and also try to make a relationship work. And some of the healthiest marriages I saw were actually in the industry, which challenges so many people because your communication has to be top notch, top notch. Anything that is bothering you, like they bring it to the table right away. They don't hide it, fester it, like nothing. It's like, we're going to address this right now. We're going to work through it and then come out the other side. So no jealous, like, yes, there's jealousy, but not like that lingering, all consuming, this is going to threaten the relationship. It's like, oh, this is a normal human response. Is there evidence that I need to be worried that you're going to leave? Yes or no? And let's work through it. So I don't know. I don't regret it at all. And I know that's shocking to a lot of people. There's a ton of consequences that I'm going to have to deal with because of that decision and that my kids are going to have to deal with. And that's not going to be easy. But if I was going to be a mom before or after porn, I'd pick the after porn mom all day, because the one before would have been something like my mom, and my boys did not deserve that at all. So like the person that I am on the other side is like softer and warmer, and like I know who I am in like such a real way. And like I've now experienced unconditional love where I thought that was just a myth. I didn't know that actually existed before. So I would definitely be one of those 5% fringe women, and it's just not okay to discount me or my experience, or to say that somehow I've internalized the patriarchy because I want to be seen as sexual, or I have daddy issues. And that's why, like, sure, that might have been in the beginning a part of it, but now as a 35-year-old woman, I very much am consciously making my sexual decisions. And I think it's a life force, and to cut that off and say that you can either be the Madonna or the whore is just, that's not right. You're all of these things, you know, you're all of these things at once.
Yeah. That is the beauty and tragedy of being a woman, I think, in the world, is that I see the way that they try and regulate women in like the Middle East and under Sharia law, where you have like eyes covered, hair covered, can't sing, can't dance. And I've been in those countries, and you feel as a woman, a Western woman, you're like, oh, fuck, this really is the patriarch. I mean, it is truly repressive. And you feel the way that men look at you as a Western woman because they know you're kind of a loose moral floozy or whatever. And it is, I feel lucky to have been raised in a culture that is so permissive and allows women to play with all of this stuff. Because I think right now in the culture, what we're seeing is on the heels of the sexual revolution, which is truly, like, Europe is like, get over it. You know, they've been I always feel like Europe is so much more healthy about stuff like this, because although they're probably in their own weird phase now too, but even growing up, we just had my mom is more European. So she just always had a more European mentality about things like nudity. And it was just like, I always feel like Europe's like, yeah, we've seen some titties in our time. We've been around for a while. And America feels very much like a, teenage, like adolescent who's just seen boobs for the first time all the time to me. But I do think we're kind of on, we're a couple of decades into that now, where there's maybe some maturity happening or some balance. I think you have to go like way overcorrect, and now people are pulling back a little. What do you think about the, regulation of porn in a state like Texas, or, well, not really regulating porn, they're just making so you have to have an ID. What do you think about porn on the, male psyche now that it's so easily accessible? Do you think that it's affecting, you hear from kids like that men are like trying, they're more like trying to choke and have these like unrealistic expectations. What are your thoughts on that?
I have so many thoughts. So I guess starting with the restriction, because it kind of is, because they know people don't want to give their, it's what do you call it?
Biometrics.
Yeah. So there you have to scan your face, and then some places are making you show a government issued ID. There have already been data breaches with that. So who's watching that? And then are they holding on to it? And then are they also like watching what you're watching, and then they're going to use it against you in some weird, it seems like a massive violation of the First Amendment.
Privacy too.
Right. That as well. And it is protected, whether you like it or not, it's protected under freedom of expression. And then you have the right to not have the government in your bedroom. Like that's so odd to me. They use it under the guise of protecting children. That's not the case, because kids are more tech savvy than all of their parents.
Just get a VPN.
You put a VPN. And then even if that doesn't work, the only sites that are abiding by these regulations are the big ones that don't have illegal content on them.
Yeah.
So now you're pushing them to these honeypot websites that have really dark, really questionable, and probably illegal content. So you're actually doing more harm. And it's like the arrogance of people in general. Like we think that we see a problem, we see a solution, and we're going to implement it, and nothing, like case closed. What ends up happening are always like second and third order consequences that we never saw, and they end up being worse than the original problem. So I think that we should pay attention to that. I think the buck stops with the parent. Make sure that they have a device that they're able to handle. Make sure that there's safety mechanisms on it. Check in. Going back to Europe, like they actually have PSA ads on regular cable reminding parents, like there's this one, it's these really two famous like German porn stars, and they come and they knock on the door, they're naked holding a laptop, and the parent opens and they're like, hello? And they're like, do you know where your kid is right now? And the mom's like, what? And they're like, he's up there. It's maybe a good time to talk to him about safe internet use. So like parents step up and take responsibility. No one is advocating for kids to watch this content. It is so dangerous, right? Like that you don't know what they're going to stumble upon. It's just inappropriate. So no, kids should not be consuming it. As far as how it's affecting the brain, there's no way to tell. Obviously it's going to have, some kind of, are we good? Yeah. Okay. No, you're fine. It's going to have some kind of effect, but so does this thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if we're talking about dopamine drainage and like all of this fasting, I mean, you get the same negative effects from scrolling too much or watching too much TikTok or playing too many video games. So I think that's more a technology issue. And then they've tried to look at the brain before and after porn, but they can't do it because when they try to get all these 18-year-olds, everyone has watched it at least once. So if you look at how many people are actually having a problem with overconsumption, it's a single digit number. And that ends up being a lot of people when you consider it's hundreds of millions of visitors a day on just one platform like Pornhub. That is a lot of people. But if you say, well, most people can eat ice cream and it's not a problem, but there's this single digit number, we'll say 5% that overconsume and destroys their life, and they become morbidly obese and they get diabetes, and then that tail spins. You don't then make ice cream illegal. Right. You say like, well, how can I support this person? And what is it that they're trying to get with this overconsumption of this product? And if it's not porn, it's going to be something else. Like that is also true. So it'll show up in gambling, food, other women. What they tend to think, because it doesn't meet the DSM-5, which has kind of gone off the rails in general, but it doesn't meet that criteria of being classified as an addiction. So it's more like a compulsion issue. It's more of an avoidance tactic. And then when it comes to the violent treatment of women after watching porn, there's also tends to be a tendency in those individuals to already have an antisocial personality disorder of some sort, like narcissism or just being antisocial in general, or already having misogynistic views of women, right? Like that was already there. And then the porn kind of like was an outlet for them. And then they're bringing that into the bedroom. As far as like what is rough sex, you'd have to define that, because like, is this rough sex, or is it choking until the girl's like passing out? Is it spanking? Is it slap? Like that spectrum is so massive. And I don't know if you got into any like erotica yet. I'm in my erotica phase. I love it so much, but those books are filthy and they're violent. And the ones that have the most ratings, like 17,000 plus reviews, which is not an exaggeration. It's like the guy, it was non-consensual at first, and the guy is big and broody and forceful and slapping and choking and spitting and all of the things. And these women are gobbling it up. Wow. These housewives are gobbling it up. So I think a lot of it too is just women are.
Is it housewives who generally?
Yes, dude. Go on. That's book talk or smut talk. You don't have TikTok. I'll have to show you some videos. But it's just regular moms with their mom bun and their jeans and their coffee and like their kids in the background, and they have their earphones in and they're just listening to Phil. So I think we've been sexual since forever. The dawn of time. Yeah. What is changed is the technology that we're using and the availability. But they found this, what they're considering to be like the first piece of porn, and it was made out of a tusk, and it's like 18,000 years old is what they're thinking. So we've always liked it. It's always been, it's not going anywhere. It's just, how do we use it in a healthy way and understand that it does have a powerful effect on us and our psyche. And I think that it would be just as much of an issue for me to expect like any man that I'm with to be the guy from my erotica novel. Just like it would be a man like expecting every woman that he's with to be like Jenna Jameson. Right. Right. Like these are forms of entertainment, and they kind of need to stay there. And if you want to consent and play with that in the relationship, then you can do that. But these things like have to be a conversation. And I think that's what's happening is there's so much shame still around sexuality that if a guy wants to experiment with something he saw, or a woman wants to experience something that she read, they're not having that conversation to make sure that they're both on board. Right. Because that's not hot. But you can do it in a hot way. Like you can do it in a playful way and without killing the mood. But like if you're doing something that's outside of missionary and normal, like you need to ask. Yeah. Or body language even. Yeah. And I think so many people, they don't know how to read nonverbal communication, which is like 90% of it. Yeah. So if you see that she's like kind of like closing off, or like her face isn't like, it's not a full body yes, then maybe ask, is this okay? Are you enjoying this? Is there something else you'd like to do?
I don't even know that they're having sex anymore, like the younger generation. That's what's weird to me is you have all this talk about abortion, and it's the issue, for this election in particular. I still think Kamala's going to win, and I think it will. She's gonna win? I think it will. I mean, I've been wrong about every single one, so maybe I'll be wrong. Likely, other than Trump, I knew he was going to win in 2016. I thought he'd win in 2020. And I definitely was wrong about the red wave in 2022. I thought there would be a red wave. I thought people would punish their states and governments more for the bad decisions they made around COVID and the vaccine mandates and all that bullshit that everybody they
forgot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I think people were kind of traumatized by it, and they just wanted to move on collectively. And then it was post Roe v. Wade, and I often joke I underestimated how much bitches love abortion. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, even though it sounds that way. It's really just a joke. But I was like, bitches love it's just like the only explanation I can come up with. But then when you look at the numbers, the younger generations are having less sex. It's the first time in the history that they're having less sex than the generation like our generations. And so that's a weird dichotomy for me. You have like all of this kind of moral panic around porn, and maybe that's why they're not having as much. I would argue it's probably just they're getting stuff from their phones. They're like getting that hit from their phones, and they're having different kinds of relationships. But I also think these younger generations grew up under MeToo and all of these like, you've got to be like, can I kiss you? Can it robotically like, may I touch your hair? And there's nothing hot about that, even to the point where they have the apps where it's like, here, fill out this form, this consent app, and sign it before we even engage in any kind of foreplay.
And the problem with that too, and someone brought this to my attention, which seems so obvious because having it all on paper and in front of you, it's harder for my brain to understand it because it's just like more in the moment. But he's like, you can't do consent before, because if you're in the middle of it, like maybe what was a yes before is now a no. Maybe what was no before is now a yes. Yeah. So it's impossible to do consent before. It's a constant conversation when you're engaging. And that's why it's like is this okay? It doesn't work. Right. And then it also takes away the right to say no in the middle, because you're like, well, you agreed in the beginning.
And you can't enforce it. Right. So even if you say yes and then say no, they're not going to be able to enforce she said yes. She said yes in her consent app. So it's like the dumbest thing. But more importantly, I think it really tries to erase awkwardness, and sex is awkward. Yeah. And I understand the desire to, and I really think this is a huge part of the trans movement, is you're uncomfortable in your body, you're in puberty. I remember puberty. It was horrific. It sucks. We all go through it. It's a rite of passage of being a human, going through puberty and having it be awkward and stinky and smelly and horrible. And you couldn't pay me millions of dollars to go back and do it again. And we've just got to go through it. But now we live at a time where everything's personalized, everything's convenient, everything's at the tip of our fingers. And there is this strong desire we don't ever have to stand and be bored anymore because we can just look at our phone. And there's a strong just inclination to try and eradicate awkwardness and
or discomfort
at all. And I think it's misguided. Mm-hmm. Just you can't cheat that. You're still going to end up feeling awkward and uncomfortable. And if you think sexuality is going to become less confusing when you swap genders, you are misguided. It's not going to be. And now you're going to be on meds for the rest of your life, which is the other thing that's even like, not to change topics completely, but even like the Ozempic thing, I'm like, yeah, I understand we have an obesity crisis. We should probably do more talking about what's in our food and how Americans are just chill with everything being poison, and less about how we can just take a pill to fix it, because now you're on meds for the rest of your life. You can't go off of it.
And it's so expensive.
Right now it is.
Yeah, right now it is, yeah.
I'm sure it'll go down. But it's still like you are now signing up to be on a medication for the rest of your life. And talk to the hairdressers about what Ozempic is doing.
To hair?
Yeah.
What's it doing?
All the hairdressers I know will tell you they know exactly which clients are on Ozempic because their hair is falling out.
Because they're malnourished, probably.
I'm like, this is not healthy. You can't cheat this.
Whoa.
Hairdressers always say this. They're like, I know when my client's lying about being on Ozempic because their hair starts falling out.
Well, no, you see it. So it's like your skin and your hair is the first thing. They're the biggest indicators of health. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if that starts falling out or gets dull or your nails start breaking, and it's all collagen.
And they get that like Ozempic
Which
face,
is why
they
the
call
pillow
it.
face is in right now, because everyone's on Ozempic. So then they're fixing their Ozempic face with pillow face. That's my theory.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so just fill up the gaunt.
This is all like we're just on the transhuman trajectory. You know, it's like we're just like headed towards just like give me a robotic arm and make me part droid, like cyborg or whatever. And I do think even when my husband and I talk about like I never use Siri or any of those. I'm very like, I hate all those technologies, and I just don't trust that bitch, Siri. And he uses them very readily, and he's like, give me all the technology. I'll do whatever. Just like make it convenient and easy, and turn off the lights with my voice and whatever, like have a smart house. And I'm like, oh, it all sounds so creepy to me. And the one thing I would like is where you have some kind of chip that calculates like how much actual stuff is in the stuff you're consuming. I'm like, I would probably be okay with that. I mean, there'd be bad uses of it, and I don't want anyone to have access to that information, which would probably be impossible. But I would like something where it's like, you're dehydrated, you need to drink X amount of ounces of water, and like that sandwich had, you know, here's the breakdown of what it, like, you just ate 7 grams of protein. Like,
see, but I feel like that creates more of the problem that we're seeing in everything else in our life right now, which is becoming so detached from like
yourself,
your own inner knowing. Like, you know when you're thirsty.
I know.
So there's this thing with Dave Asprey, which, like, love him or hate him, sometimes he just has some zingers. And he was talking about, well, how much water are you supposed to have in a day? And it's like 8 glasses, or it has to be a gallon.
Water growing up, by the way.
No, and he's like, no, you know how much water to drink, because when you're thirsty, you drink.
Right.
That's it.
But
When you're thirsty,
I read
you drink.
somewhere that when you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated.
Possibly.
So it's already too late. You're actually already behind.
Oh, well, then maybe Dave Asprey is wrong.
That's what I read somewhere. I mean, I have no idea where I read that, but I remember, I feel like I learned that actually in pregnancy. A doctor was like, don't wait until you're thirsty because you have to drink so much water when you're pregnant, as you know. And it's weird though. The kids are very on board with like their Stanley cups, and they all walk around with.
They're all super hydrated.
They're all very hydrated. They're all into Sephora gift cards. All the young. I'm like, my 9-year-old niece was talking about, and has old school parents, not online. It's just in the culture, and is like, I want a Sephora gift. I'm like, what do you need from Sephora? You have perfect skin. I still barely have a skincare routine, obviously.
Mine's toxic. It's not my skincare lady, because she owns like a tiny little boutique, and it's all like clean products, all that. She calls me a junkie because I go in and I just scoop, like, keep me young forever. What do I need?
Yeah, and we live in that time too, where it's like a youth culture that you're constantly chasing, like youth forever. And there's that whole idea of like, oh, if you're under the age of 45, you'll live to be 120. I'm like, that doesn't sound great, honestly.
But what if you can do it? What if you can do it? And
if I can do it like this,
yes,
sweet.
Yeah, and maintain this level of
health. I don't want to be like Bryan Johnson.
Yeah, he
seems so creepy to me.
So creepy. He looked better before. I
think so too. Yeah. He's like, my age is like all of these, like the age of my brain is now 35. Like, how do you calculate?
You don't.
It's so weird to me. But again, you have to like swap out your blood with like younger blood.
So you have to get a blood boy. Yeah.
This is like fucking.
I don't make enough money to have a blood boy, so that's not even a possibility.
Would you have one though if
I'd like to do a transfusion?
Young forever.
I don't know. Maybe. Honestly, I've always kind of considered the idea of being a vampire.
I love how fucking out of control both of us are. There's like no consistency. We're like, we can be sluts, but also women, be careful about being sluts.
Just consciously make the choice. That's the thing. There's like this
conscious about making a choice to have a blood boy. I don't see what the problem is.
Yeah,
it's probably better for you than Ozempic.
It's right. Yes, probably.
Like Big Pharma or a blood boy? I'll take the blood boy. Like, just unhinged.
I would, and I would feel better about it as long as he was tested and I knew the blood was clean. Sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. So
he was happy to be there. He gave an enthusiastic yes.
But can he consent to that?
Well, then you get into a whole bunch of other things.
How
right?
do you feel about surrogacy?
I think for all of the talk that everyone has about exploitation and marginalized groups and vulnerable groups, and using that for the porn discussion seems exclusively, why are we ignoring surrogacy? Because to me, that is the most intimate, magical, spiritual thing I've ever done is have a baby.
Yeah.
It is like it's transformative. And they've done studies. If you have the baby, like a surrogate, and it's someone else's egg, when the baby is born, the baby shows a preference for the birth mother, not the genetic mother. So there's something there. Like they're with you for 9 or 10 months, hearing you, smelling you, feeling you, the energy that goes into that. And that's not woo. Everything is a wave or a frequency. So there is something that's happening, bonding in that relationship. And then you take that baby away and give it to this other new person that they have no idea who it is. I don't know that that's consequence free. I think, I don't know that the government should get involved in that, but personally,
they did in Italy. Italy just banned it.
Did they? Mm-hmm. It seems like you have to be in a really dire position to be taking money to carry someone else's baby.
Maybe. I mean, the women who do it say that, well, one thing I didn't know is that when you talk about informed consent, you had to have had a child before.
In the U.S., that's a law?
In the U.S., you have to have had a child before you can become a surrogate. Okay. And I'm pretty sure it might be a state by state, but I believe, I wish we had a Jamie. I believe you have to have had a child in order to be a surrogate, because again, you can't know what you don't know. That I could be wrong about that though.
But that wouldn't explain then all the women that have the baby and then they take it. So if she's having a baby for, say, a gay couple or a lesbian couple, and the birth mom actually is like, no, I'm not going to give you the baby.
Yeah. Whenever I see those videos online of like the I don't know, I feel like it was one of the things that I have conflicting feelings about it, but I feel like the baby is really the last person who's taken into consideration in the whole.
It's not a requirement.
Oh, okay. Mm-mm. Someone told me it was. Maybe it was in California.
I'd be surprised, because that seems responsible to say that.
Yeah.
But
or maybe it was in some like another country. I feel like somewhere that is a requirement, but perhaps it's not. I mean, I know it's not in like Ukraine.
I just think it is it's so great, and I understand why. Like, I was told I was infertile at a really young age. I had endometriosis, I have Graves' disease, so like a lot of autoimmune stuff, and that's actually what led me to breaking up with my ex, because he wanted kids and they told me I couldn't. So that that destroyed the relationship, thank God. But I know how devastating it is to want a baby and be told you can't have a baby. And I entertained that when I was younger. It's like, I'll just, I'll do a surrogate, or I'll do IVF, or I'll even adopt. I'm going to be a mom. But you have to say at what cost.
Right.
And it's affecting so many people. So I don't know that is the highest vibration decision to make. Like, I don't know. Again, I don't know that I want the government getting involved in it. And I saw that Trump was saying that he's going to have insurance cover it because we need more people.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's the thing too. So like right now, maybe based off where we are globally, it's just like, let's be pro-life.
Yeah.
So if it's going to create more, if it's going to create more life, then let's support that for now. And maybe that is the greatest good. I have no idea.
There are those situations of like, you can't have another one and you want another one, and you had cancer and you had to like,
there's so much nuance to it.
And should they be deprived of having a child because it's still very strange. It's a strange one. I was kind of radicalized when I had a baby because I was like, what? They take you see how much a baby needs you.
I could never carry a baby that was not going to be my baby. Because I would be broken fundamentally after that.
Well, and that was so much of the only thing that helped me in postpartum was and they say that this is like the most, because everybody comes over and they want to take the baby, they want to hold the baby, and holding the baby was like the most healing thing for all of those hormones. Like I felt normal when I was with her. It was like, okay. When the grandparents were over and they were with her for too long of a time, I could feel the like darkness creeping in and the hormones, and I didn't experience like postpartum depression, but a lot of it was just, I was just with her, and I know that like symbiotic thing was healing for me in postpartum recovery. It's like when you see what women go through when they have preemies and they have to leave them at the hospital. It is just gut wrenching just to have to like leave your baby at the hospital, and then you are experiencing all those hormones and you can't be with your baby and they're still in there. And women are gnarly, man. We just like, it's actually crazy how strong. I was saying this on Dumpster Fire yesterday. I was like, we have carried this species on our backs and in our wombs, and it is wild what women are capable of, and I do want to see more of and men have done so much to provide safety, and I see when you see this election, you see how damaged the rhetoric for men and women has been in our culture. You see how much the right has a woman problem. The crazy cat ladies and the body count discussion. And on the left, you have a real man problem, which is all men are the scourge of the earth and they're toxic rapists and they are all like the patriarchy needs to be smashed. And then you see birth rates collapsing, and you see real political problems with this that aren't going to resolve themselves until the two sexes kind of come back together.
And then how do you facilitate that?
How do you facilitate it?
I think you try to get people offline, because all of the things that we've mentioned that I'm sure the comment section is going to be full of, and
because
we're both going to be called whores 1,000 times over. And that's fine. But that doesn't happen when we walk out of the building. Right. And
not yet.
It's yet to happen. And
maybe,
then
maybe we'll blow up and then people will just be like whores with their pitchforks. You fucking whores. I've had this reoccurring dream where people are calling me whores in a mall, and I know that it's not going to happen because malls don't exist anymore, but it is a weird reoccurring dream I have where like people are literally
But is that like the worst thing either?
I'll take it. I'll take it if it means that we have, I mean, that's the thing about the regret being a slut piece that I heard from so many people and gay men, just like it's had like 500,000 reads. It's crazy. There's something there, men and women responded to that piece. Gay men too. There's something.
That's surprising because they are known
and
for
they have some regrets about their promiscuity, and it's not. And I think our culture is so regret averse. People had so many issues with me using the word regret. I was like, you're allowed to regret things in your life. That's just being a human. And it's like, no, you've got to. I think it's this like YOLO attitude that we all try to inhabit and live with in our, like Bed Bath and Beyond pillow world that has the like expressions on it where it's just like the platitudes that we're like, YOLO, we got this.
See, the thing that changed the most for me with how I look at sexuality and sex in becoming older is it's not like a number thing. It's not if you keep it under this number, you're going to feel okay about yourself. Right. Or if it's only in a relationship, you're going to feel okay about yourself. Because I've been in a relationship where that I should not have slept with that person at all. I think it's who deserves to be in that intimate space with you. And that can be someone that is casual, that you met and you really deeply connected with, and you know that they're going to respect you and they're going to take care of you in that space. And then that can also be in relationship. But in the same token, you can be in a relationship with someone who does not deserve to be with you in that intimate space. So it's just looking at the individual and saying like, A, is this a full body yes on my part? Do I want this, even though I know it's going to be fleeting? And then B, which is the important thing, is does this person deserve to be in that space with me? And the answer is not always going to be yes to that. So if you're calculating those two things, I think you're going to be in a good spot. And you could be with 10 guys, but if they were all like so conscientious of you and your pleasure and your safety and all of those things, then like, absolutely. I don't think you're going to walk away with that feeling used or regret. I think that happens when you're with someone who is not mature enough to be with you, and they're going to be self-centered and focused only on their pleasure. And they look at you as a thing to be disposed of. Well, you shouldn't be interacting with that person at all.
Yeah. But we live in a very disposable culture.
You can, and you choose your like level you want to play at, you know what I mean? Like, so with me, it's like you would never find love. You're never going to find someone who finds you desirable long-term. Like it's
They're
only
not wife material.
Yeah. I've had even like some of my close friends
say
that.
We're not wife material though.
No, we're not for novice players. I'll say that. But if you,
that's the title of this episode. We're not wife material.
No. They were right. But
trolls are always right, by the way.
And you just gotta wait.
Just wait long enough. Trolls will be right.
Oh my gosh.
No, it is hard because I don't know. And then you go through like the phase of your life where you enter into like perimenopause, menopause. And my therapist is like, women burn their entire lives down in this phase because they go crazy. And I'm like, are they going crazy or are they just seeing things clearly that they didn't see before? How do you gauge that? Are they just like entering into their giving zero fucks phase of their womanhood? And part of entering into that is seeing things that you may have lied to yourself about, or things that you tolerated that are no longer tolerable, entering into, and closer to the end of your life and realizing how precious it is. I mean, I don't know. I think it's easy to, in our culture, kind of make pathologize everything. Like, oh, this is something that's bad, when it's like, is it? But it's very. I do think, because you and I both come from essentially porn. I mean, even if I wasn't doing porn, I was still selling. It's porn, right? Do you consider that porn?
I don't, but porn to me is penetration.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then no, it's not porn. Sweet. A lot of the trolls would tell me that
less of a whore than you thought you were.
Slightly less of a whore than I thought. Thank you. The whorish ways. It's funny, like, thinking about how many great whores of yore there were. I loved that movie Dangerous Beauty, because have you ever seen it?
No.
What?
I haven't put it on my movie list.
Oh my God, you have to see that movie. You have to see it.
I have a
It's
movie
all
list.
about a courtesan. She was actually a real person.
Oh, really?
And they got to go to the libraries and like learn all the cool stuff.
What was it called again?
Dangerous Beauty.
Okay.
I think it's based on a true story. She was a poetess, and she was also a courtesan, but they were the ones who were allowed to learn and go to libraries. And there's this great line in the movie and it's with a wife, and she's like taking her through Venice, showing her how the courtesans end up, and it's not good. And she's like, I would much rather live that than live a life of perpetual inconsequence that I do as a wife. And it's like, it's such a fascinating movie about exactly this dynamic that you and I are talking about, that Madonna and the whore, which has played out for women forever. And I'm not sure we'll ever be able to escape it.
See, to me, my perspective is it's actually kind of new. So that
is it.
Yeah, there's this fallacy of the way. I know. There's this fallacy of how like things have always been, the fallacy of tradition. But if you look at human existence, it's been hundreds of thousands of years, and it has been a blip that we've had this puritanical culture. It has been a blip that we've had a nuclear family. It has been a blip that we have been monogamous. Monogamous meaning man and a woman, and they're together for the rest of their lives. Monogamy used to mean, even just shortly, not that long ago, it was until one person dies, which is about 10 years. So a lot of these things that we think are long held and must be true because of tradition are actually not tradition if you look at the whole scope of how we've existed. So I think it's something that we're playing around with. I think it's something that doesn't work when you look at divorce rates and you look at infidelity rates, because you can't just look at, well, they've been married for 60 years. Well, how much were they faithful for and how happy are they? Like, those aren't metrics to be ignored either. And men cheat just as much as women cheat. So we can't pretend that women don't have sexuality and they don't have desire, because they're cheating at the same rates as men within marriage. Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was men more.
No, it's about 50-50.
Interesting.
So I think...
Is it like physical? What do they consider cheating?
Yeah, physical cheating.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if you were to take into like texting and stuff, it would probably be the same because of social media and all of those things. But I think the whole point that I want to get across with like my podcast and my work and this conversation is to just radically choose your life for yourself. Like, make the decisions for you that are in alignment for you, and fuck everyone that's telling you that there's one way to live. Because,
but what about the kids?
What do you mean? Like your kids or like the kids?
The kid. I mean,
for them, yes, like they have to figure out what kind of life that they want.
No, but I mean, what about, I think often you make decisions once you become a parent that are better for your kids than they are for you.
I think what tends to be good for you is probably good for your kids, because more is caught than taught, right? So if you're constantly in this place of self-sacrifice and you're not taking care of yourself and you're not following your dreams, you're teaching your kids to not follow their dreams, or that, let's say you have boys, you're teaching them that the wife has to automatically give up on herself and her identity, and that becomes just a mom. What happens when the kids leave? She goes into depression. She loses her sense of self. She ends up in a divorce or like a totally lifeless marriage, because now her whole core identity, which was mom, has now been ripped away. So I think it's so complex, and it's like, how can I be like the most whole person that I can be, the most alive, the most like the person that's contributing the most, like all of these things that you would want for your kid. And then that is modeled. And then that's the important thing. But if you're in this marriage that like you're not affectionate and well, you're still married, well, you're teaching them that they don't deserve affection.
Yeah.
Right. Like a marriage is just something that you get through. It's an agreement and I'm going to do it. It's like, well, no, I want more for my kids than that. So I think there's a lot of nuance and no one can tell you what decision is right for you because your life is entirely different and how that's going to play out is yet to be seen. So make your decisions yourself, find your alignment and move fast forward.
I love that.
But we'll do this again. I'm bringing you to North Carolina. It is like my mission to bring you to North Carolina. And because I want to do like long format. Yeah. But let's go do our shoot.
Okay.
And then check out, we're going to post it on social media. I think it's going to go on your Substack and you guys can come see a bunch of photos. Yeah.
And yeah, we'll do lots of these things.
I'd love to.
We'll probably be sister wives.
Let's do it. To be continued. Bye, everybody.
Bye.